To chat about this a little bit more is Brett Herron, who's the Good Party's General Secretary. Brett, a very good evening to you. You've also, as the Good Party, commented on this deportation of Janus Walus. You saying that you welcome this. Tell us more.
Well, I think, good evening, Massa. Walus remaining in South Africa, first of all, is not an option because he lost his citizenship in 2017. So once his parole period had ended, there was no option really but for him to be deported because he had no valid or legal reason for staying in South Africa. And also, we do say sort of good riddance. He inflicted the most heinous crime on South Africa at a very important and tenuous time in our negotiations towards a democracy. The purpose of the crime appeared to be to unleash chaos and to derail our movement into a democracy. So he's not a person that South Africa should be hosting indefinitely. He's not a South African. He committed a terrible crime, and he needs to leave our shores.
What do you make of how the whole process has been unfolding? You know, there are those who have criticized the government, including the SACP, including the Hani family as well. I mean, just earlier before we heard the SACP's Alex Mashilo saying that they only heard about this deportation taking place as late as yesterday. Considering the role that Chris Hani played in the SACP, that would also be a disservice to that organization too. As the Good Party, what do you make of how this was all handled?
I think that it's a disservice certainly to the Hani family, and I've seen in the media, I think your station's been reporting that the Hani family or late Chris Hani's daughter wanted to have a word with Walus before he departed for Poland. So I think the disservice is to the family. I think that the way in which the South African government has handled almost everything post the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as findings, and we mustn't forget that there are many families who are victims of apartheid era crimes. I think that the way that the South African government has handled the TRC's recommendations, the failure to prosecute, and in this case, the failure to conduct a proper inquest into the Hani murder is a disservice to the Hani family.
Yeah, and I think we've seen, you know, throughout the years as well, the Hani family being quite vocal about how they feel about this too. And as you mentioned, the TRC recommendations as well, this very democratic government that you are now a part of has the ability to, as late as it may be, try and implement some of those recommendations. Will it even happen at this point? Will we see justice for the Hani family? Will they get that closure that the daughter was looking for of having that conversation? It seems highly unlikely when he has been whisked off. We actually don't know at this current time where exactly Janus Walus is. We do know that he is at OR Tambo International Airport and he will be deporting tonight. But as my colleague was saying a little bit earlier before this discussion, they didn't even get a glimpse of him. And of course, one may understand that there is a threat to his life too. But that also, would you say, Brett, that flight departs with the closure as well?
Well, I think that, look, I mean, we support the call for an inquest, but obviously the key witness that could assist an inquest is now going to be a free person living in Poland. So although an inquest would have been useful if it had happened while he was in custody and obliged to give evidence, the fact that he's a free man in Poland does, I think, undermine the strength or the ability to conduct a meaningful inquest. We have to assume that the authorities are in possession of information that maybe is not in the public domain, and that an inquest may help in unveiling it and making it public. And maybe we will get behind the truth of this story because quite clearly when Walus and Darby Lewis were denied amnesty by the TRC, one of the reasons was that they didn't make a full disclosure. So there's obviously the TRC found that there was something that they were withholding in their application for amnesty, and I really do hope that for the Hani family and for the South African democracy, and for other families, that our government starts to take the TRC's the failure to implement the TRC's recommendations far more seriously.
What would you say, Brett, the consequences are of not implementing those TRC recommendations, and how are we seeing them 30 years into our democracy?
Well, the TRC was obviously rolled out at a time in our democracy when there was a great deal of goodwill in South Africa towards a rainbow nation and towards healing. And the TRC was meant to be part of the healing process, where those who were victims of apartheid's terrible crimes would receive reparations, would receive information about what happened to their family, and the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, also addressed the inequality in our country by proposing a wealth tax, and none of those recommendations were properly implemented. And now, 30 years later, or 21 years after the TRC's report later, the inequality challenges in our country have been exacerbated. There's a polarization in our country where I think the goodwill that existed 20, 30 years ago has evaporated, and South Africans are increasingly divided. So the best time to have implemented the TRC's recommendations was when the TRC made those recommendations, because South Africa was in a space where we were ready to make reparations for the wealthy, to make their contribution to reducing inequality and to contributing towards those reparations. But I think that goodwill has gone as people have gotten away with it.
Brett Herron, thank you so much for your time this evening and just sharing your insights with us. That is Brett Herron from the Good Party, just talking to us about one of our top stories, the deportation of Janus Walus.